Welcome. Tonight is Monday, December 14th, 2020. This is the regular City Council meeting for the City of St. Peter. It is 7 o'clock p.m. This meeting is being conducted in person and virtually. We will call the meeting to order, and would all please join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Everyone should have a copy of the agenda. Are there any changes, corrections to the agenda? If not, is there a motion to approve?
Ed will make a motion to approve.
Carrie Johnson will second.
Okay, Ed 1, Carrie 2, all in favor of the agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Agenda is approved.
This conference will now be recorded.
We are not going to start over. We'll just keep on going. Next, we have the minutes from our November 23rd, 2020 regular meeting. Those minutes appear on pages 6 through 9. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve?
Noel will move.
Emily will second.
Shannon 1, Emily 2. Any changes or corrections now? All in favor of the minutes from our November 23rd meeting for approval, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Those minutes are approved. Next, we have the minutes from our December 7th, 2020 special meeting. Those minutes appear on pages 10 and 11. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes? Carrie?
I know I'm hard to keep track of, but I was here in person on that December 7th meeting.
Okay. For that December 7th meeting, which we're talking about here on that, anything else that anybody else has? With that change of putting Carrie present on that meeting date, is there a motion to approve those minutes? I did that already.
Ed will make a motion.
Did I do that already? No?
Not for these.
Sorry. Ed 1, Emily, was that you?
Yes.
Yes. Ed 1, Emily 2, all in favor of the minutes from our December 7th, 2020 meeting, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Those minutes are approved. Next, we'll address visitors. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any agenda item? Seeing no one, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any matter whatsoever? Seeing no one, we will move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda begins in detail on page 12 and concludes with the resolution on pages 44 to 47 and includes the following budgeted purchases in excess of $10,000 to Graymount for quicklime for $29,875. The ChemSolve for biosolids polymer for $29,394, and also for ferric chloride for $49,000, and a pre-treatment polymer for $10,580. To Industrial Pneumatic Systems for an air compressor for $25,220. The Loggers of St. Peter for a 2021 Ram 1500 pickup truck for $30,619. To Hawkins Inc. for sodium metabisulfite for $11,000. To Univar for caustic soda for $40,000. To Professional Water Technologies for anti-scalant for $26,100. To Axon for cartridges, some taser units for $45,420. We have the following advisory board and commission appointments. To Megan Rubel on the Civil Service Commission for 2021 to 2023. To Corey Abels for the Economic Development Authority for 2021 to 2025. To Joe Metzen and Larry Potts for the Heritage Preservation Commission for 2021 to 2023. Mary Ann Hardy for the Hospital Commission from 2021 to 2025. Judy Peterson on the Housing and Redevelopment Authority for 2021 to 2025. Laurel Pillars to the Library Board for 2021 to 2023. Brian Fremo to Parks and Rec Advisory Board from 2021 to 2023. To Andy Davis for the Planning and Zoning Commission for 2021 to 2023. And to John Smithers and Keith Keogh for the Tourism and Visitors Bureau from 2021 to 2023. The following employee appointments: to Letitia Snow for Assistant Library Supervisor for $17.35 per hour. Carolyn Kelly for Part-Time Circulation Court for $11.70 an hour. And Kimberly Horner for a part-time circulation clerk for $11.70 per hour. We have the following license renewals for soft drink. Not going to read them all. There are 31 different soft drink license applications. For tobacco, there are 12 listed. For amusement device, there are 5 businesses listed. For a show license, there are 4. For jukebox, there are 4. Dance license to the Capitol Room, and this is for fiscal year 2021. And a solid waste hauler, there are 3 of them: LJP Enterprise, Waste Management, Hanson Sanitation. Plus the following schedule of disbursements for November 19th, 2020 through December 9th, 2020. Are there any questions, changes, comments on the consent agenda? Carrie?
Yeah, Todd, I just noticed that there's, seems to be quite a few wastewater and water treatment plant chemicals. And is this just the time of year to stock up on those?
Yeah, Pete can speak to this more if you want some additional information, but this is the time of year that we stock up on those or order for the rest of the year. Just to be clear, not all these chemicals are delivered all at the same time. Sometimes they come in incremental delivery throughout the year. So if you want more information, we're happy to provide that, or I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I was just wondering if this is something that we expect to see, in December or at the sort of the
It's
end
usually
of the
December
year.
or January, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Pete, I noticed, and I think this is just a typing error here on page 12, way at the bottom. It says based on 2021 usage records. I'm assuming that's supposed to say 2020?
Should.
Correct.
Okay. It's the only thing I think I saw reading through any of this. Any other comments? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Ed'll make a motion to approve.
Carrie Johnson will second.
Ed 1, Carrie 2. Any questions or comments now? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Grahams,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat. Aye. Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Consent agenda is approved. Next up, we have unfinished business, and tonight we have Mr. Moulton to finalize the 2020 bowling alley demo. Pete?
Mayor Zeman and City Council, as you guys are aware, we worked with our engineer to develop a plan of specification to demolish the bowling alley. The low bidder on the project was Renewals Construction from Kasota, Minnesota. We bid this project in 2 phases. One was a base bid, and one was an alternate where we had, if there was hazardous materials in that alternate, we would identify that cost. Happy to say that the contract went really smooth. The demolition was accomplished using just the base bid. There were no hazardous materials that needed to be disposed of with the alternate numbers. So moving forward, what we're asking is that you accept the project as complete. This would finalize our project with Renewals Construction in the amount of $41,051. And we would accept this project. In the future, you will see us come back in January with additional costs to finalize the project. So there is more work that was done there than just this construction project. But we're happy to say the part we did contract out is done and we've moved forward. With that, I would ask that you approve the resolution on page 49, and I'm available for questions.
Questions? Brad?
Not a question, just a comment. Pete, I sent you an email, but I think everyone should know that site looks so good right now. I mean, it's not, you didn't just take the building down, and between milling up the parking lot and then just planting grass seed, just that whole green parking lot, it just looks so much better than what was there before. Your crew who worked on that really deserves to be commended. I think it's going to look great when the grass starts growing next year. So.
Thank you. I'll pass that on.
All right. Emily, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, it was basically just to say the same thing. I drove by there today, and it's just an incredible, just how much it changed in so little time. So thank you and your crew for all your work.
You bet.
Anyone else? The resolution accepting the 2020 bowling alley demo project and authorizing final payment to Rainelt Excavating appears on page 49. Is there a motion for approval?
DeVos will move.
Emily will second.
Brad 1, Emily 2. Any questions or comments now? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Grahams,
Aye.
Councilmember Ruflat,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. That concludes our unfinished business. We will move to new business, and first up we have the 2020 tax levy and the 2021 budget, and we have Sally here with us tonight.
Mayor Zeman and City Council, I want to say thank you for all your time and questions regarding budgets and levies. I know everybody loves it and looks forward to this time of the year. The budget information starts in detail with the memo on page 50 and ends with resolutions on pages 143 and 145. As you know, we've been working on these since July with the directors and then review with Todd, and then we've come back to you with the preliminary levy in September. And then we came again for the goal setting session in end of November, and now we're here tonight to get the final levy set. As you know, by state statute, we have to set the levy by the end of December. So December 31st is the last day that we go to county with a certified levy. The only change that has been made since the November 30th presentation was the reduction of $45,000 in the equipment certificate. As we discussed at last week's workshop, the cost for the construction of our community spirit bathrooms is down to $155,000 versus $200,000. So that reduction in the equipment certificate decreased the levy from 51.76 on November 30th down to 51.66. What that would do, the impact on $150,000 property residential property in St. Peter, and their property value didn't change from year over year, it would increase their property tax for the city portion of taxes approximately $1.01. And on a $250,000 commercial business, it would change $3.40. If you want, I can go into detail, or do you just want to ask questions and we'll go from there to approve the levy?
Why don't we, since we've gone over this already on workshops, why don't we just go to questions, Sally? I appreciate it.
That's fine.
Unless you have something other specifically you would like to point out?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Questions for Sally? Gotta be something.
Brad.
There it is. Brad.
Todd, we talked about this earlier today. You know me, I hate fun and I hate children even more, so canceling the two goes together. Just a question, it was a question on the swimming pool expenses. Number one, particularly just related to the repair and maintenance account on page 110. That'd be page 41 of the budget. Like we talked about earlier, I noticed that the expenses for 17, 18, and 19 didn't exceed $1,000, but both for 2020 and 2021, you have $9,000 budgeted. And it just sort of looks like the 9,000 is kind of a placeholder. You mentioned that over the last several years that you maybe had had years where you had a couple thousand, then one year that was 11, that's the pool heater. I just think that based off of what we're seeing for historical trends, that 9,000 is from putting up, it almost seems like a placeholder, and that should come down not to 1,000, but say to $2,000 or $3,000, because but I think the budget should be in line with expectations. I don't know, Pete, did you have something on that at all?
Sure, council member. If you look back under the 2020 current year budget, we had planned after our maintenance superintendent came in to do a bunch of work at the pool. We'd identified quite a few things that we wanted to correct that year under the maintenance program. But since we were going into COVID, we kind of put those plans on halt because we didn't know how long the pool was going to be open or if it was going to open. And so what that is Todd is right, that is just a carryover. So now what our plan would be is to go in and make some of those changes in the spring.
So what would those changes be? Because like I see the pool deck cracks in the under the swimming pool improvements and such, but I don't see anything listed for the repair and maintenance for account 404 from 2020. Like I do see some improvements and such in there that were pushed over, but nothing for, and even for, I see a lot for account 210 that has like the PAL lift and the Fumbrella, but I don't see anything for 404.
Yeah, that's mostly the internal mechanisms as far as the piping, the connections, just different aspects to make the pool run behind the scenes.
Okay, like I said, it's not detailed out in the budget, so that's why I questioned it. I don't see anything for 404, so.
Understand, if we do make a big change like that in the future, we'll make sure we put some footnotes in there for you.
Okay, thank you. That like I said, that's what it just didn't otherwise appear that there was anything there.
Right. Yeah, and as you can see, we didn't do much. We just got the pool up and going with the idea that we'd keep it alive until we decided what we were going to do.
Okay. And then the other thing Todd and Sally had talked about, just looking at the what do you call it? The loss. It's projected to have a loss of 190,000 this year, and I know previously you said last summer we typically lose 90 to 105, and looking back, the lowest was 125. Just trying to think of ways to bring that in. Just because while I know we have cash in the bank, it'd be nice to make this thing look a little bit close to previous years. Is to consider using equipment certificates to spread the cost out of, say, the pool crack. Essentially the stuff that's going to be there for in excess of 5 years. Obviously some things like chemicals and stuff you can't, but I just think looking at 190,000 loss, just budgeting that for the year, which is when you look at our tax, what we're doing property taxes of 2.2 million, and that's 8% of our property tax collection. So if we could just find a way to essentially smooth out or just sort of trim back. It just seems, it seems like a lot, particularly when the fact that you've told us before that the loss is around $100,000, and this is almost double what we were told our losses are. So, that's just what that's just what I look at is just to make sure that we can find a way and potentially look at fee increases. It were $3. I think they're at $3 to get in. You know, look at what I'd say. Do an assessment of. Just look at an assessment of what other aquatic centers are. Obviously, a lot of those facilities are significantly better than, and I shouldn't say significantly better, but have significantly more amenities, and see what they're charging and see where St. Peter runs compared to those. Like I said, it's a lot, particularly when the loss actually is almost double of what we were initially told we run about. So those are just my comments on it. And Pete, thank you very much for the detail on the repair and maintenance. So
Anyone else have any other comments, questions? Carrie?
Yeah, not on what Brad was talking about. It's something different. But I've been thinking a lot about local government aid lately and listening to legislators talk about it. there was a panel at the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities Conference that I tuned into, and I mean, how confident are we in that projected 2021 number? And I've heard legislators on both sides of the aisle say that 2021 could be potentially safe, but it's out further than that, that tough discussions would happen. But if we can't count on that number specifically for 2021, what sorts of conversations do we have here at that point? Or do we just kind of go into this assuming that we can count on that specific number for revenue?
Mr. Mayor, if I can.
You bet.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Johnson, I cannot predict the future on this one.
You don't have a
And so
crystal ball?
Your guess is as good as mine as to what's going to happen. But I think the process looks something like this. That if there are significant local government aid cuts, and I'm not sure what exactly, from a numbers perspective, significant is, at least in my mind, it's probably more than $250,000. That's a time when the council has additional discussion about potential cuts, as we did in 2009 and 2010. I can't speak to the confidence that I have in the number. Your reading the tea leaves of the legislators is probably better than mine. But right now, we think it's a rational number. And at least for 2021, the state at this point appears to not be in a substantial shortfall. So based on that information, based on the policy that you have relative to reserves, I think you're in good shape. If there is a suggestion that you should raise levy additionally, just in case, I would say that has not been the pattern that's been utilized by the council in the past, and I feel confident in the level of reserves that you have, that you could take a pretty substantial hit and make modifications to expenditures from a capital perspective, or slide some additional things into equipment certificate that you really needed to be able to buoy yourself until a longer term plan, or the state is able to stabilize its financial outlook theoretically after COVID. So although you didn't ask this, I feel okay today, about as okay as we normally feel at this point. But there certainly could be changes, and if there are significant local government aid changes, that's something that should come back to the council. And staff's role or job in that would be to bring you modifications to the budget to ensure that your budget is as balanced as it is today. I want to mention out loud that as you see within the documentation, not only the narrative or the memo that we provide you, but also the numbers, we are anticipating spending in deficit about $97,000. And that's okay. You have reserves that can make that happen. And so our experience with this and our understanding of what that means has changed over a number of years. And so it's okay as long as we kind of have a good plan. And I have great confidence in our staff and what we do. And as we've talked about before, the budget that you put together is often very prophetic, if I can use that word. We stick to budget. We stick to budget. It's not just a numbers thing. It is a plan for work that's going to go on within the city. And so I have great confidence that if we have to make some modifications, that we will. I will tell you though, and I've used this maybe with other councils in the past, maybe not with this council, but if the council wants to discuss, as an example, and I don't mean to trivialize, the number of, the amount of postage that we spend. That's probably not something that I get to control or you get to control. If we have a notice and we have to send letters, we have to send letters. I mean, there are certain things like fuel prices and other things that are largely outside of your control. But we do a good job of understanding the things that we can control, and we'll be able to make modification. I hope that answers, maybe more editorial than you wanted.
Yeah, I mean, there's some hand-wringing over what happens at the legislature. It's such a big part of our budget revenue, so.
Yeah, you know, as we've illustrated here, we're levying a couple $1 million. Local government aid is $3 million.
Yeah.
So it's more than what you levy locally, so it's not unimportant. But I feel confident about what we're able to do and the reserve amounts that you have in place, that we'll be able to withstand some of these things without, hopefully, substantial modifications in the kinds and the levels of service you intend to provide.
I have one more question,
Sure.
Mr. Mayor. Along those lines, I was wondering about an page number. see here. I think it's 71. I was, again, looking at state aid and grants, and I was wondering, the other state grants and aid, and that number fluctuates over the years. So is that tied to projects that we have? How do you budget or project that number, and what is that for?
Councilman Johnson, one of the increases in the 2020 year-to-date is the $900,000 for CARES money that we received this year. That's what's driving it so much higher than budget and other years. And we have not allocated that out. Right now, it's sitting here. We're waiting for all the spending to come in, and then we'll allocate some out of general fund into the enterprise funds, because they've done some spending using CARES dollars and some other ones. 492,000 of that will go back to EDA to cover those loans that we've already given, the first round of loans that we granted. So there's going to be some movement there. Otherwise, it stays right around the 30,000 or so of just other grants that come in.
So, if I'm reading this correctly, let me see where I'm at here. So I see what sort of happens for 2020, but what about, or maybe that is 2020 still. Never mind. I think you answered my question.
Yep, you get your police aid every year, and then some fire things and some reimbursements, but your big number this year that's fluctuating, because 250 of that's going to stay in the general fund, and the rest is going to get allocated out.
So CARES dollars falls in this category, other state grants and aid. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
Okay. Anyone else? The resolution adopting the 2020 tax levy collectible in 2021 appears on pages 143 and 144. Is there a motion for approval?
Ed'll make a motion to approve.
Carrie Johnson will second.
Ed 1, Carrie 2. Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Grams.
Resolution is approved. Sally, did you have anything you wanted to add before we go to this next resolution?
No, thank you.
Okay. The resolution approving the general fund, special revenue funds, debt service funds, capital funds, and agency funds for the 2021 fiscal year appears on page 145. Is there a motion for approval?
Ed'll make a motion to approve.
Noel will second.
Ed 1, Shannon 2. Any questions or comments? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Grams,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next up, we have a hospital equipment purchases, a couple of them, and we are quite honored here tonight to have Lori Zook and Paula Beska. I always goof your name up, Paula. I think that's close enough. to help us out. So I don't know how we're going to do this. If both of you are going to present, it's all yours.
I think I get to start off as usual because it's money and you always get to hear from me when it's about money. So, Mr. Mayor, council members, the commission has approved and is recommending for your approval 2 pieces of equipment tonight. The first one is an endoscopy tower. The endoscopy towers that we have are obsolete and cannot be supported anymore, and one of the cameras is broken. This obviously does not function very well when you need scope work done, and so we looked at 3 different options. One just brought the equipment that we had up to bare minimum. The other ones, the third option was kind of the Cadillac of the north. And the option that we are recommending is the one that provides us with new equipment. It's the same kind of equipment that's used at the surgery center, so our surgeons are familiar with it. And it is a reasonable cost. The cost of this equipment is $187,120. There is no trade-in on the old equipment because our old equipment was Stryker and not Arthrex. But the rep and the vendor service and repair service on this equipment is more responsive than what we were receiving on our other equipment.
Okay. Questions? Were you done, Lori? I'm sorry. There was a pause.
Yep, that was it. I'm trying to keep it reasonable.
Yeah, you're doing very well. I have a question for you, Lori. What other types of equipment do we have with Arthrex?
We use some of their implants. We have some other hand tools, I believe. And Paula, is there anything that's larger than that?
No, that would be it. It's a lot of our scope equipment,
Okay.
the hand tools, as Lori said, but our other electronics have not been Arthrex, and they're not any given brand, to be perfectly honest.
Okay. I was just, you had mentioned that you have better response with them as far as service, and I was just kind of curious what else we had going on there with them.
Right, and that's true just from the rep and vendor piece with the implants and some of those hand instruments.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have any questions? If not, the resolution approving the purchase of an endoscopy tower for endoscopy tower for River's Edge Hospital and Clinic appears on page 148. Is there a motion for approval?
Carrie Johnson will make a motion to approve.
Emily will second.
Carrie 1, Emily 2. Any more questions? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Grams,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Lori, again for another piece of equipment.
Yep. So our Omnicell unit on the south wing of the hospital needs to be replaced. The Omnicell is a computerized cabinet that allows limited access and coded access into to dispense the drugs needed on the floor. These units are the unit that needs to be replaced is no longer upgradable and is not supported anymore by the vendor. It was determined that we couldn't look for a different brand because all of them need to talk to each other, because not only do they dispense the drugs, but if you can't get enough of one drug out of one unit, it will talk to the other units in the hospital and they can level out the inventory of the drugs within the system. It also requires then just one server, and the maintenance on that is much easier. We did, however, look at 3 different group purchasing organizations that we have the ability to use. HPG, which is one that we used very significantly throughout the construction project. Minnesota, which is a consortium of smaller hospitals throughout greater Minnesota, and Alina. And the pricing, the most favorable pricing for this unit was available under Alina, where we fall under their pricing categories. The cost for the unit with an annual service cost of $1,860 per year is $116,799.21.
Okay. Questions for Lori on this one? Brad?
Just a clarification, Lori, for the people who are watching who don't have the agenda in front of them. This is coming from hospital funds, correct? And not general funds, correct?
That is correct. This is coming from hospital funds.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else? Lori, you had mentioned that this was not upgradable. What's the shelf life on a piece of equipment like this? How old is this?
This one, I believe, is 7 years old.
Okay,
They can be updated and actually are updated annually, if not more, depending on what kinds of drugs came out, the dosages, those kinds of things. Once they're not upgradable, then they're not safe to dispense drugs out of anymore.
okay,
So,
all right. I was just kind of curious what pieces of equipment like this usually last for, or how long?
it depends on how often things change, but
Sure.
typically if you can get 7 years out of one of these, it's pretty good.
Okay, all right. Anyone else? Questions, comments? The resolution approving the purchase of the Omnicell dispensing unit appears on page 150. Is there a motion for approval?
Ed will make a motion to approve.
DeVos will second.
Ed, 1, Brad, 2. Any questions, more questions now, comments? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Ed Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Grams,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye. Resolution is approved. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Paula. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next up, we have Russ with the revolving loan modification request for River Rock Kitchen. Russ.
Mayor Zeman, members of the City Council, in 2016, the city provided a $40,000 revolving loan to Christine Montana Rasmussen as she purchased the kitchen and bakery assets from Tamika Rasmussen, who continues to own River Rock Coffee Shop. Montana bought the machinery and the equipment and started the bakery and kitchen at a new location at 219 Park Row. She has developed markets with, River Rock Coffee is contractually obligated to purchase Montana's baked goods. She's also then established markets at the Coffee Hag in Mankato, Indigo Organics in Mankato, both the St. Peter Food Co-ops and additional food co-ops in the Twin Cities, and then both Chamkaska and Morgan Creek wineries, in addition to many others and other goods that she sells through River Rock. When the loan was made, Montana was entering space that she had leased. And so without the ability to obtain a mortgage to secure the loan on the real estate in which she occupied, we were provided a subordinate mortgage against the residential property that Montana and her spouse own on 4th Street. The first mortgage is held by First National Bank. At this time, Montana and her spouse are seeking to refinance their personal residence and take advantage of some interest savings. And as such, First National Bank has asked that you would subordinate your loan to a new refinance mortgage that they would provide in the amount of $77,000. The refinancing would be limited cash out, meaning the only cash taken out as equity would be used to pay the closing costs of the refinancing. The balance of the city's $40,000 loan is calculated to be $21,360, and I will report that all payments have been due, when due, as due, and in the amount due without a single exception. A November appraisal of the real estate suggests a value of $135,000. If you were to add the bank's $77,000 mortgage to the $21,360 remaining on the EBA loan, that would total $98,360. Given the $135,000 value of the property, that would fall well within the guidelines regarding your revolving loans. I will note that we did not undertake a review of the personal or business financials, given that they were reviewed about 2 months ago when Montana did ultimately buy the real estate in which she locates her business. The EDA has considered the matter, and they have recommended your approval of the subordination as requested by First National Bank. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my report, and I'd answer any questions that you or members of the council might have.
Questions? Hopefully they're doing well.
I think they're doing as well as they can under the current circumstances.
All right.
I continue to support them by buying monster cookies at River Rock.
All right. Any questions, comments? The resolution accepting subordination of the city-held mortgage securing the revolving loan made to River Rock Bakery and Kitchen to a new $77,000 refinance mortgage proposed by First National Bank appears on page 153 and 154. Is there a motion for approval?
So move, Mr. Mayor.
Emily will second.
Steve 1, Emily 2. Any questions now? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Grams,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next up, we have the North 3rd Street Project Engineering from Livermore to Union, and Mr. Moulton.
Mayor Zeman and City Council, I'm here tonight to ask you to authorize Bolton and Mink Engineering to complete engineering and design work for the North 3rd Street project. This would be the third consecutive area on North 3rd Street that we've worked on in the past few years. This scope of work would include new asphalt, some storm catch basin replacements, some additional curb and gutter. The engineering proposal that you have in front of you includes design, topo of the entire area, staking, and construction administration. The price here is within the realm of the city's request of work that needs to be done here. Again, this would finish off our North 3rd Street area, as you can tell. Then we'd be picking another area, probably North 4th Street, and begin work on that in upcoming years. You have a memo from Jeff Domros on page 57 and 8, and there is a resolution on page 59 that we're asking approval to begin engineering on this project.
Okay. Questions for Pete? Jeff?
Mayor and members, if I could, just
Sure.
provide clarification. This is not North 3rd Street, as
Right.
you talked about previously. Just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page where we're talking about.
Yep. Up to Union Street.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Carrie?
Livermore Union.
So essentially, it finishes this project along the street. Is this kind of the
3rd Street
final?
part of it.
Yes,
Yep.
ma'am.
Okay.
I have a comment too. I'm just always amazed when I read that there's pipe from 1938 that still is in good condition. I just find that amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's not so much that it's in perfect condition. It is that the way we repair piping nowadays, a lot of it's done between manhole structures and done internally without tearing the street up. So unless there's a sizing problem, we feel comfortable with the utilities that are there and in making them work for a while.
So that sort of infrastructure can be maintained and repaired pretty well without ripping up the street again, basically.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Steve's and my pipes are about that old, and we're still functioning, right, Steve?
Some days.
Some days, it said so. Okay. Brad, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question. It was on, it was page 157 of the packet. It was from Jeff Domers. Just on paragraph 2, it talks about the existing 6-inch water main. Its replacement is not proposed. However, if financing allows, it is recommended to replace with new 8-inch ductile iron pipe. So if financing allows, what does that mean? How do you determine financing allows it?
Well, according to our assessment policy, what we do is we look at the entire project. And we talk with our customers along North 3rd Street there to see what scope of work we're going to need. If there was funding, like grant funding, where we wouldn't have to go back to the customers, we would try for some of those things, but we'd have to do that well in advance. We didn't plan to replace that, and the reason we don't is because we go back and look at our water main breaks and see where our maintenance is being performed on that pipe. And one of the things we did back in 2009 is we put a 12-inch water main down Minnesota Avenue and took care of some of those weaker points along that stretch there. So we feel very comfortable that we'll get another 20 years out of that water main in that area, which will last the lifetime of that street.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Not, the resolution authorizing Bolton and Mank to provide engineering services for North 3rd Street improvement from Livermore to Union Street appears on page 159. Is there a motion for approval?
Noel will move.
I heard one. Emily, was that you on the second? Sorry.
We were at the same time, yes.
All right, so Shannon 1, Emily 2. Any other questions at this time? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Grams,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next up, we have the Clark Street Surface and Utility Improvement Project, and Pete again.
Mayor Zeman and City Council, again, we're asking that you allow or authorize Bolton and Mink Engineering to perform the engineering for this project. This would include design, bidding, and construction services for the area west of Nicollet Avenue on Clark Street. And right now that is a cornfield. And what our plan is in the future, as you guys are well aware, is we're going to go from the standard subdivision all the way over to Nicollet Avenue with sanitary sewer. This would be west of Nicollet Avenue, where the future street would be laid out, where we will tie utilities in with the development that is going on right now to the north of Clark Street. We anticipate putting this project together, laying that out and installing utilities sometime this summer. We anticipate a very competitive project along with this design work here, because there's a lot of sanitary and water main projects and street projects that are going to be let this spring. And in St. Peter here, we're looking at an expansion that would be new to our utility service area. And with that, there's quite a bit of engineering that needs to be accomplished in order for that to happen. Mr. Damras has supplied some additional information on page 162. And there's a resolution on page 163 that we're asking approval, and I'm available for questions.
Questions? Pete, or maybe this is a Jeff, nothing specifically on this, but construction costs always seem to bite us sometimes. And I was just wondering, since there hasn't been much really going on, everything has kind of been put on hold for a lot of things. Do we have any feel for what construction costs are doing? Especially, I guess I'm concerned about concrete. Jeff, do you know?
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, it's a little early to tell right now, but over the last 5 years, since the recession in 2009, construction costs have steadily increased, 2 to 3% at the rate of inflation, sometimes more. But here in the, when we bid that sanitary sewer project, that was here late in the fall. We got some excellent prices. So it'll depend on when you bid the project and if there's any other work going on, as Pete mentioned. So I would expect prices generally to be somewhat similar to what we've seen, maybe a slight increase.
Okay. All right. Like I said, I don't know how all this COVID stuff is affecting down the road construction, on bigger projects that have been kind of put on hold for other reasons. I know the smaller concrete guys, they seem to be busy as can be all the time. It's tough to get a hold of any of those guys to do anything. Any other questions, comments? Not, the resolution retaining Bolton and Mank to provide engineering services for Clark Street surface and utility improvements from Nicollet Avenue for 500 feet west, which would be the Traverse Green property, the north end of the Traverse Green property, appears on page 163. Is there a motion for approval?
Ed'll make a motion.
Okay. Steve 1, Ed 2. Any other questions now? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Grams,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you. You bet, thank you.
Next up, we have the 2021 non-contract, non-union employee wage. Todd.
Mayor and members, this starts within your packet on page 164 with a resolution actually starting on page 167. I have a fair amount of information included in your packet, but generally what this is doing, Mayor and members, is providing for a 2% across the board wage increase, with the exception of those areas that are listed as anomalies and those folks that are on some scales. So I wanted to make sure that that was made clear as well. The anomalies that you see here include the Finance Director, Recreation and Leisure Services Director, Library Supervisor, Recreation Supervisor, Information Technology Specialist, Public Works Director, and Community Development Director. And then we have a couple of other, or actually 4 or 5 other position titles that I'm looking to make slight modifications to on an hourly basis to help ensure that we are more in compliance with pay equity rules that are in place within the state of Minnesota. Seasonal employees would receive no percentage increase, but rather they'd receive a 25-cent per hour increase. And that's done for a couple of reasons. One is to keep pace with other competition that we have within the community. So let me use this as an example, if I may. Our competition for hiring lifeguards isn't the pool next door. It is really McDonald's and other places like that that folks are looking for summer employment opportunities or temporary employment opportunities. So there'd be a modification that would be included to those, as well as Public Works seasonal employees as well, a quarter per hour in each of those. So as you may recall, those areas have scales, and it would just make the scale move up a quarter. Most of those positions have scales that are either 4 or 5 levels. First year, second year, third year, fourth year. And there's a 25-cent difference in each year of those scales. So let me know if you want more information about that. But Mr. Mayor, I think I provided a memo that outlines the needs and my recommendations. Certainly Marketplace has a bearing on this, and as I mentioned on the first page of my memo, trying to help ensure that when we have good employees, that as they leave us, we're not paying the next person in line more than they were receiving, drives some of this, and has been a driver for previous councils as well. Mr. Mayor, members, I'm happy to answer questions as I can, and there is a resolution included in your packet on page 167.
Okay, all right. Questions? Carrie?
Todd, can you remind me what data and statistics you use to determine market rate and where people are at and where they fall on the range?
You bet. It differs based on the position and the comparable opportunities. So as an example, when I talked about lifeguards, it's not the pool next door, it's other things. That certainly is the case for some of the position descriptions that I describe as anomalies and are included in the resolution. And so those are done on a regional basis using data from Job Bank and other sources. Clerical support personnel is a great example of that. Frankly, Carrie, I wouldn't necessarily recommend increases based on marketplace in those categories, because generally we're well within the marketplace. However, in this instance, as I articulate in the memo and as a part of the resolution, in those areas, pay equity is a factor that you have to comply with that private sector does not. And so that's what drives some of this. I would also mention that as we see some of those lesser paid positions, what happens when we do, and it's just the math of it, when we do straight percentage increases, higher paid positions sneak away from the other positions. And so part of this is to make sure that that doesn't happen as it relates to pay equity. And it's a little bit of a catch-up, so to speak, related to pay equity. Positions like the Finance Director and Public Works Director and Community Development Director, I do survey or get data through League of Minnesota Cities and other sources. We do participate at times, not all the time, but at times with other cities that are doing comparable worth or pay studies. And so I review the data as it's made available. Oftentimes what happens is that, as an example, the city of Marshall might be doing a study, and for our participation, they share that data with us. There are not a lot of like positions within finance director, community development director, public works director, as an example. But I mean by like positions within the private sector. And the public sector there is. Specifically related to the finance director, as an example, we hired that position when the turnover occurred a couple of years ago at the lowest end of the scale. And so my goal has been to move that to the midpoint as the finance director has worked within system and become more accustomed to public sector accounting versus private sector accounting. With the public works director, it is really trying to keep pace. What I see there is that certainly within our community, there is a broader base of knowledge that's necessary. That's really driven by, frankly, the way that we are structured. And as an example, having the electric utility under the public works director's belt, so to speak, is very different than what we see in most communities that might be comparable. And so this is closer to the midpoint, but frankly, as turnover occurs, and we're seeing a little bit more turnover within those public work director positions due to boomers retiring and other things, man, when they're hiring in, they're outpacing where I've been at or been recommending where you've been at in that position, as an example. Community Development Director is a little bit similar to that, in that in St. Peter, because of what our expectations are, we have a broader base of knowledge. We have other community development directors or planners, but they might not have both planning and economic development and historic preservation commission, as an example. And so the breadth is a little bit further. I am very confident in this one that we are lagging Marketplace in this one. And Marketplace, to me, is similar sized communities, but they might not have the exact breadth of scope that we have in this position within the city of St. Peter. So places like Waseca and Fairmont have community development directors or planners, and they're all paying a little bit more than where we're at, frankly. And so my goal is to try and keep that moving. Boy, if you have other specific questions, I can go through all of them if you'd like.
That's okay. I was more interested where you pull that data. And I had a question more on the kind of entry level side, some of those lower paying positions. Do we ever worry about, or do we think about wage compression with the bottom rising up, and is that a problem? And or do we have higher turnover in those positions so it doesn't become such an issue?
If you're talking about those entry-level positions, I would tell you, and I don't have necessarily any data to support this, but my instinct is that we overall within your employee base do not have a lot of employee turnover. And so I think at those entry-level positions, it's a combination of wage and benefits that are the driver that keep people with us. But I got to tell you, I do think in some of those support positions, we probably, driven by pay equity, are a little bit higher as people are in that position after a few years.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah. The other thing that came up, as you know, we've talked a lot about the budget.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I was reading this, I'm like, well, how does this all fit with the budget? Because this is in addition to the 2%. And I see that the changes fall within the budget parameters, as it says in the memo, but you sort of start thinking about this way back when, during the time when you're developing
Yeah, I
the
started
budget.
thinking about this in June and July.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions?
Mr. Mayor, just to point out, and as you read it, this is for all non-contract employees. So this would exclude the city administrator. This would exclude the 5 bargaining units that you have currently too.
Right.
Just to be clear where this is at.
Okay. The resolution establishing the 2021 wage for non-union, non-contract employees appears on page 167 and 168. Is there a motion for approval?
Carrie Johnson will make a motion to approve.
Noel will second.
Carrie 1, Shannon 2. Any more questions at this time? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Grams.
Aye.
Excuse me, resolution is approved. Next up, we have our last item under new business for tonight, annexation by ordinance. And Russ.
Mayor Zeman, members of the city council, you first had your first conversation about the annexation back in August at a workshop, and then you more specifically discussed the matter in front of you today at your last goal session on the 30th of November. You are asked tonight, Mayor and Council, to consider a resolution directing staff to initiate proceedings for annexation by ordinance of certain lands which are completely surrounded by lands within the municipal limits as authorized by Minnesota statutes 414.033 subdivision 22, and to schedule a public hearing for January 25, 2021. Minnesota statute that was referenced provides for the annexation by ordinance of lands that are completely surrounded within the municipal city limits. And then on November 9th of this year, you entered into a development agreement with St. Peter Investors LLC for the construction of their 66-unit multifamily structure that's currently under construction in North Traverse Green subdivision. You also made an obligation to provide for the extension of the sanitary sewer that currently ends at Warren Park at the western end of Standard Lumber subdivision. The development agreement states the city acknowledges that it is committed to the extension of the sanitary sewer main from its current terminus at Warren Park, Standard Lumber subdivision, in a westerly direction to serve the CAD-G, now St. Peter Lands LLC development. The developer shall not incur any assessments for the installation of the sanitary sewer main until such time as it would be located within the Clark Street right-of-way lying west of the Nicollet Avenue or County State Aid Highway number 20 right-of-way. The city further commits that the sanitary sewer extension shall be installed and operational prior to the anticipated October 2021 project completion date in anticipation of occupancy. Bolton and Mank has prepared the engineering and the design of the sanitary sewer main that would be extended from Warren Park to serve this development. It would be required to cross both lands that are owned by, one is owned by Ben and Joanna Pell. The other one is owned by the Levon or Bonnie Enns interests. We are asking for a 100-foot temporary easement during construction, and then we have asked for a 40-foot permanent easement upon the Enns property and a 30-foot permanent easement upon the Pell property. The sewer main proposed to be installed would be installed well underground. It would not daylight, or there would be no manholes or other structures that would be exposed above ground. The site following construction would be restored appropriately, and at that point they can continue to farm or conduct any activities above that easement as they are currently undertaking. In anticipation of the project, the city has engaged John Foster Appraisals to conduct appraisals for both the temporary and the permanent easements. And then the city has engaged Dan Wilson from Henning Professional Services to provide for the negotiations of the easements. We have used Dan in the past as we had acquired the right-of-way for the potential future St. Julian Street roundabout. Based upon the appraisals that were presented, we had made offers to both property owners for the easements. Both have provided counter offers, which your staff, after discussing the matter with Mr. Wilson, City Attorney Brandt, and the City Administrator and Public Works Director, we have declined to recommend your acceptance. Given that negotiations appear to be at a standstill at this point, and considering your October obligation to have the sewer line in place, at this point, we believe it's prudent and necessary for you to begin the annexation of the properties by ordinance. This would include the Ben and Joanna Pell property as well as the Levon Enns property. There would be a few other property owners that would be brought into the matter, as their properties would need to be included to complete that loop of the properties completely surrounded by the city limits. The annexation then, once completed, would provide you the opportunity to exercise eminent domain to compel the granting of the easements. In anticipation of action, we have asked the Minnesota Boundary Adjustments Board to pre-map the proposed annexation so that we can be ensured that it does complete that loop, if you will, and does include all of the lands necessary to constitute the lands completely surrounded by the city limits. From the map that you looked at your November 30th goal session, it's been determined that 40 acres at the intersection of Sunrise Drive and Traverse Road would not be required to be included in this action to complete that loop. That is given the annexation of the 2/3 acre parcel that had been assembled with Warren Park, which constituted the ends parkland dedication. So it has been pre-mapped by Minnesota Planning through the boundary adjustments. Once it's annexed, you would have standing to initiate eminent domain, which is the taking of private property for a public purpose. We would have to then provide notice to the property owners of your intent to initiate the eminent domain. You would have to deposit funds with the court equal to the amount of your offer for the easement. So you'd still need to pay to acquire the easement, which is proper and appropriate. But once you initiate the process, generally you would have access to the land within 90 days. That does not determine the final value or price of the easement, which would be decided by the courts through the contested process. But you would generally have access to the property with 90 days as the price is being determined through the courts. After that process, we could then begin the installation of the sewer as obligated by the development agreement, and then provide for the restoration of the property so that they can continue to farm the land as they had in the past. Mr. Mayor, I'll answer any questions that you or the council members may have, but I will note that there is a resolution prepared on page 174, I believe, which would authorize staff to initiate the process. City Attorney Brandt would provide the notices to the property owners as required by statute, and then we would set a date of public hearing for your last meeting in January of 2021. And Mr. Mayor, if you'll indulge me, I'd ask that perhaps the city either add or correct.
Jim, do you have anything to add? You're out of distance there, but...
Yeah. You know, not much to add or correct, just condemnation is always a challenge. So in the meantime, we will be continuing to negotiate with the property owners, and hopefully we can reach a negotiated settlement, you know, soon on it, which would allow us to go better. But condemnation is always a challenge, so it's not something you want to do, but sometimes you just have to do it.
Okay. Well, it's a situation where, you know, we're saying, you know, eminent domain, which is true, but we're restoring this, we're putting it back, you know, all we're doing is running pipes underneath. Or you know.
Exactly, and that's why we're really comfortable that
Right.
that it will be successful. It's
Yeah.
a time process, and luckily the parties have now obtained counsel, so hopefully that will be more beneficial
Right.
rather than less beneficial.
Okay. Ed?
So if they go out, let's say we don't start until July or something like that, and they got a crop planted in this area already, are they going to get reimbursed for that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we will have to update the appraisal. If we cannot get it done relatively soon, we'll have to update our appraisal to include crop damage. So
Okay.
they will get reimbursed for crop damage.
Okay. Just making sure.
Yeah, I think that the crop damage, I don't believe would apply to Mr. Pell because he's got his in CRP. The crop damage would apply to the ends property.
Okay.
And I think we're talking about, if I remember right, 1.86 acres or something like 1.8 acres, something like that.
Relatively
average.
small area, yes.
Yeah, yeah. All right, any other questions? Carrie?
Yeah, I know we had talked about this before, but.
Carrie, if I could, microphone.
Oh, is it on? Yeah, I know we talked about this before, but if I'm a property owner and my property is annexed, how do I experience owning my property in a different way, negatively and positively?
Well, the negative part is now you're subject to city taxes. In this case, the land is currently under what's called green acres tax values, which means it'll still be taxed as ag land and not as development land.
And then do the property, well, I suppose it's all agricultural land, so there's no, okay.
You'll be taxed as
yeah.
ag land. You will not be taxed as development land until such time as they sell it and don't want the green acres provision.
So, a little bit unrelated, but if I have a residential property, do I then become more, I'm not a part of a township anymore, I'm a part of the city and I can participate in city elections and all of those things, okay.
Yep. So
I
you
think
have
I'm
more
just trying to
competition for
understand
your
how the
job.
experience changes for a property that's annexed.
Right.
But I'm supportive of,
Yeah, the property, once it's annexed, not always, but usually the county will have two values on it, a high value, which is kind of a development value, which they don't get taxed on, and then the lower value, which is as long as it's being farmed from border to border, basically it remains under that tax rate for that as ag land. The value may change a little bit, but not enough to make a big difference. Anyone else? Brad?
Russ, so I am supportive of this because, it is holding up our development, and I think we do need to keep that in mind. A while back, you gave a presentation on multiple parcels scattered throughout St. Peter that were not part of the city of St. Peter. And you had recommended basically that the city start working through potentially annexing them. Do you have a plan to proactively annex or proactively propose annexing parcels, or just waiting on a case-by-case basis such as this?
Councilman DeVos, that decision would have to be made by the 7 of you, the 6 councilmen and the mayor. We presented information. We cited the pros and cons of such annexation. I will note that the lands that are subject to the action that you're asked to initiate tonight are only those that are required to close the loop. We have not included the school property on the other side of County Road 20 or Cassaw 20 or Nicollet Avenue. The other residential properties, we have not initiated that. But to provide you the ability to install a sewer line, we are recommending the action. Now, if the ends and the Pels were to provide an easement prior to completion of the action, your staff very well may come back and say that we should halt the proceedings. We're not necessarily looking to annex people that do not want to be in the city limits, but we recognize the obligation that the city made when they entered into the November 9th development agreement. So I still think that if they were compelled to provide the easements or to complete the negotiations of easements successfully, we would come back and we would say that perhaps the city council may be mindful to halt the current action and not go forward with the public hearing or not adopt the ordinance.
Okay, because the way I understand your prior presentation was that you thought it would be in the city's best interest to progressively work to close, to clean up these parcels around the city.
Yeah, given general planning practices, that leapfrog development is discouraged for a number of reasons, and I believe when we spelled it out, your ability to utilize eminent domain was not even one of the reasons that we spelled out that evening. But that is the situation that we're facing this evening.
Okay, I do think it is something we should consider taking a look at going forward, just to essentially clean up so we don't find ourselves in a similar situation going forward with another development. So, thank you.
So Russ, I need some clarification then on your resolution. In the second paragraph, it says 7 parcels, but we're only dealing tonight. You're just pointing out that there are 7?
There are 7 at this point. There had been 8, and as I said, the 40 acres at the intersection of Sunrise and Traverse we could remove and still successfully complete the annexation as proposed.
Right, but what I'm getting at is, though, you're only specifically looking at these 2 tonight. You are just identifying 7. So we're not making
Mayor,
a decision on all 7.
I'd refer you to the map on page 172.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
In order to annex by ordinance, you have to be completely surrounding the
I understand that. I understand that. What I'm getting at is, in the paragraph, it says, the city council has identified 7 parcels. Okay? So are we just dealing with the 2 parcels, that the Ends property and the Ben Pell property? We're dealing with all 7 about doing this?
Yes, sir. There are other properties that are owned by Nicollet County, and I've talked to the county engineer, and they had no issues, given that it's right-of-way. There also appears that are 2 parcels that are still in the James Wilson interest.
Right.
That look like they are remnants of right-of-way. And then finally, there is one that is in the name of Pell Inc.
Right. No, I understand it. What I'm guess maybe I wasn't clear enough here. What I'm getting at is it designates the 7, but all of our discussion has been about the 2, and then Mr. DeVos asked about looking at the rest of them. Well, to me, that is looking at the rest of them if there's 7 total parcels. I don't know if we're mixing or
Yeah, in addition to the 2 parcels in which we need easements, we
Okay.
need to annex an additional 5 upon which we need no easements, but are just necessary to
Okay.
comprise the lands completely surrounded.
Okay, all right. Brad?
Just to clarify, the parcels I was talking about were the ones that aren't adjacent to this, that are just scattered in other parts of the city, but that are still surrounded by city limits. Those were the ones I was referring to, progressively working our way through. Not tonight, but just later down the road, so.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? The resolution directing staff to initiate proceedings for annexation by ordinance of certain lands which are completely surrounded by lands within the municipal limits as authorized by Minnesota statute 414-033, I'll be with you in a second, subdivision 2, and scheduling a public hearing to be conducted on January 25th, appears on page 2021, appears on page 174. Is there a motion for approval?
Carrie Johnson will make a motion to approve.
Noel will second.
All right. Russ, did you have any comments?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I did note a typo in the first whereas. It should refer to Minnesota statutes 414033.
Okay. With that change, whoever first, Carrie, it was Carrie and Shannon, is that who it was?
Mm-hmm.
With that change, is that all right? The
Yes.
motion and the second, okay. Anyone else, any comments or questions at this time? All right, with the change, read of the first paragraph. Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Grams.
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Thank you, Russ. That concludes our new business. Next up, we have reports. The first thing I'd like to say, and I was going to do this during the consent agenda, but I want to thank everybody for serving on the boards and commissions, not just the ones that we renew tonight, but everybody. There's commitments that people have to make, and they don't pay anything. So I really do appreciate everybody serving and taking their time to give back to their community. It's very, very much appreciated. The other thing is, I heard from a couple of you as far as requests or on boards and commissions that the council sits on. For our first meeting in January, which would be January 11th, if I could hear, if there's anybody, if you don't have anything, that's fine, and I think some of you kind of indicated that you didn't, but if you have anything, get it to me by the first of the year so I can get it to Barb to be put on the January 11th meeting schedule for approval. The only other thing I have is to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, since this is our last meeting of the year, and hopefully everyone that is new to the council has enjoyed their first year. If you haven't, too bad. It's just the way it goes. And hopefully next year will be better, and hopefully we'll be over the COVID dilemma that we've been battling through for, 9 months of this year? So with that, Todd.
Mayor, members, I'd like to give just a short COVID update report on a couple of items if I could. Certainly City Hall, Public Works Administration, and the community center remain closed to the public, open, but closed to the public. So if you have business to transact, please give us a call or certainly check on our website or send us an email, and we're happy to make that work out. We have been open for a couple days at City Hall, as we've done over the COVID emergency for utility bill payments, specifically those folks that are paying in cash or trying to make arrangements for a payment. Oftentimes we find it easier to visit with those folks in person, and so we're doing that for another, I think, 2 days, Sally, is that correct? Tomorrow and Wednesday?
Tomorrow is the last day.
Tomorrow's the last day, I'm sorry, tomorrow. So Tuesday would be the last day for that. So I'm trying to make sure that people can get in and make arrangements as appropriate. So that's really important. I also want to mention that we've had a number of groups and organizations contact the city and have done some really cool things celebrating Thanksgiving and other holidays. And so that's wonderful within our community. And just my casual observation is that, boy, a lot of people have put up Christmas lights on the outside of their homes that maybe hadn't before. So I don't know if that's a signal of good weather or what that is, but that's been very nice to see. The other thing that I want to mention on a more serious note, Mr. Mayor, relates to the COVID hospitality assistance and microloan program. As of about 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock this afternoon, we've had a total of 16 applicants already.
Wow.
For that. And so Sally's team is ready to go. Russ's team is ready to go to process those things, and Sally's team will get checks out. So some of those will have checks probably by the end of the week in their hands potentially. Great. So we're really happy to do that. And as a number of folks have mentioned to me, we have good fortune to be in the position to help businesses in this way. Many other communities do not have that good fortune. So it's wonderful that we can help them out and that they're utilizing it as appropriate. So thanks to all those businesses that continue to stay open or work to get open. We want to help them as much as we can. Mr. Mayor, the next item that I have is just an update on the closed session discussion from November 23rd. As members may recall, this is about 101 North Front Street, what some people might commonly call the creamery site. Well, there is no finalization required under the law to say that we did talk about it and talk about a potential sale amount. And so while I have provided information back to the folks that provided an offer, I have not heard a final response from them yet relative to that counter offer. So please know that that continues to be in the works. Mr. Mayor, that's all that I have for you tonight, except a resolution calling for a closed session, which is on page 175 of your packet.
All right. Okay, before we ask to do that last resolution, is there anyone that would has any questions that didn't come up, or other concerns, or anything else they would like to share with the council? Ed?
Just to let everybody know, this is the fire department on me. Last Saturday night, you might have noticed several fire trucks driving around town between 5 and 7, and a couple Santa Clauses riding on top of them. We kind of did it just to give the kids some candy and stuff, and it was a huge hit. We did a food shelf drive at the same time, and we collected 1,600 pounds of food and $719 in cash.
Wow.
So we did, it was about 2 hours and 15 minutes it took to pretty much cover the whole town. So.
Yeah, I saw you guys go by in the following, or in the neighboring subdivision, and boy, once again, I thank the boards and commission members throughout the city, but for what the fire department does, and all the volunteer and all the hours you guys put in.
There was about 18 of us that were helping out Saturday night.
So that's a little over half, or right around half of the. That's amazing. Anyone else have anything they'd like to share? If not, Mr. Grams.
Todd, did you say 16 hospitality businesses?
I hope I did not. What I intended to say, we've had a total of 16, which includes 6 hospitality and 10 microloan program. A total of 16.
Okay. And then, one other comment, back when, Mr. Moulton was talking about, replacing pipes, the mayor mentioned to me, or to us, that, he and I had old pipes. Well, it brought to me a thought that last week, our former governor, Mark Dayton, got married. He's 73 and the woman he got married to was 33. So I'm thinking, Mr. Mayor, if Woody kicks your butt out the door, you do have hope and potential. That's all I really wanted to say about that.
Here's what I have to say about that. My condolences to both of them. Anyway, any other comments? If not, one thing we will not be doing is coming back into open session. We will adjourn after our closed meeting. We will not, like I say, be discussing any business after we do that, or if they're a closed session. The closed session, we have a resolution on page 175 calling for a closed session, and this closed session is for the council to meet to provide the annual performance evaluation for the city administrator. Is there a motion to approve?
Emily will move.
So move, Mr. Mayor.
Emily, 1, Steve, 2, all, Barb, any questions? I'm sorry. Call the roll, please, Barb.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Ed Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Carrie Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Grams.
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. We will recess to our closed session. And like I said, we will not discuss any more business in open session. We will only come back to adjourn. Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you, Pete.